I'm not going to rehash the gospel lesson for you because you read it and the kids just talked about it, so you've heard it again. But in the gospel story, it's about 10 people who were healed of leprosy. Now, here's the issue. Leprosy was not just a physical illness. It was a spiritual illness. It was a spiritual alienation. When someone was a leper in that society, they were alienated from the rest of their community. They were considered unclean, so there was also an alienation from their spiritual life. They weren't able to go to the temple. They weren't able to make the sacrifices they need to offer to be ritualistically clean. And so there was an alienation on several levels. Okay? Much like back 20, 30 years ago, when in ministry I was dealing with folk who had HIV and AIDS and would hear comments about how my mother won't hug me, no one will touch me. It's that same feeling. That in those days we often said it's like having leprosy. Okay? There is that sort of alienation that wasn't just a physical disease, it was also a spiritual pain that came from that alienation as well. One returns, as the story says, and gives thanks. But there's something in that story that really struck me today that I want to talk about. But this is the season for Thanksgiving. Of course, if you go to the store, it seems like it's the season for Christmas already. But Thanksgiving is just kind of around the corner. And actually, Thanksgivings are going on all season. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving in Canada. September 11th was Thanksgiving in Germany. We're actually late to the Thanksgiving game. Most cultures have Thanksgiving in September and October because that's kind of harvest time. November is a bit late on the harvest schedule, so to speak. The writer Anne Lamott says this. Her two favorite prayers, every morning, it's help me, help me, help me. Every night, it's thank you, thank you, thank you. Meister Eckhart, the 13th century German philosopher and theologian, says this: if the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it would be enough. If the only prayer you ever say to God in your entire life is thank you, it would be enough. Thanks leads to transformation. That's the point of the story today. What struck me, and I've read this story a million times, but I've never understood this before. The word never stuck out at me. When the Samaritan comes back and gives thanks to Jesus, he falls on his face. What the Bible actually says is that he prostrates himself. Prostration is an important symbol there because it's not just, we can say thank you in a lot of ways, right? I can just give you a call and say, hey, thanks so much. That was very nice of you. I can send you a text on my phone. I can send you an email. If I'm really feeling generous, maybe I can return that cake plate with a bunch of cookies I just baked, right? Return it back to you. There are lots of ways of saying thank you. I don't return things with cookies baked because you don't want to eat my cooking. That's not much of a thank you. I'm just warning you. I'm not a baker. But this isn't that. This isn't, thanks, Jesus, I appreciate it, have a good day. He goes back and he prostrates himself before Jesus. Prostration is an important sign. I just found a couple of quotes. These are other instances in the Bible. It says, Ezra blessed the Lord, the great God, with uplifted hands, and all the people responded, Amen, amen. They bowed down and prostrated themselves and worshiped the Lord. Another time it says, I prostrate myself. Let me find favor in your sight, O Lord, my God and King. Another time it says, when all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the doorway of the tent, all of them would get up, would prostrate themselves in worship, each one at the doorway of his tent. Making a prone position is an important symbol in the story today because it's not just about being thankful, it's that thanksgiving leading to transformation. It's about a life changed in response to the blessings of the moment, the blessings that God has given. Prostration is a sign of humility, it's a sign of reverence, but it's also a sign of obedience. Jenna was telling me before service today that in Japanese culture, when someone bows, the lower they bow, the more the sign of reverence. And so when one bows, they bow down low. And the lower the bow, the more humble the person is to the other person. In our tradition, you'll often see, and you don't see it on Sunday, you don't hear it, but when John's bringing the kids up to the acolytes and he's teaching them, he's okay, now we bow to the altar, we reverence the altar. Why? Because we're admitting our own humility and our own subservience to the God who's represented in that space. Prostration is a response to thanksgiving. Because something has happened and God has blessed me, my life is now not the same. In ordination, we kneel in our tradition. I knelt before the bishop to be ordained. We kneel at the altar rail to be ordained in our tradition. But in some traditions, the Catholic Church, the Episcopal Church, the Orthodox Church, I believe some Lutheran traditions, when a person is ordained, the ordinand prostrates themselves on the floor, face down, and lays there in prayer. And then they are allowed to get up. It's that idea that this moment transforms who you are. It changes us internally and externally as a response to what God has done in our life. I completely and utterly give myself to God's will. It's more than thankfulness and a plate of cookies that I return on that cake plate you so nicely gave to me. It's a changed life and a transformed experience. And that changed life, it means that we're to live and look differently than we did before. We don't know what that Samaritan looked like post-fact, but we do know something. Because first Jesus says, go and show yourself to the priest that you may be declared clean. Then when the man comes back, so all 10 are made clean, then the man comes back and he prostrates himself before Jesus and says thanks, and Jesus says, get up and go your way. Your faith has made you whole. He's the only one who was made whole. Cleanliness was one thing. Now the man was made whole. The word for wholeness there is the word for salvation. Okay? It's your faith has saved you. Something is now transformed in your life. We don't know what that man looked like down the road, but we can assume that something changed. So the question for us is, how have we experienced blessings in our life? How have we experienced life-changing understandings of what it means to truly be grateful? Grateful for our things, grateful for relationships, grateful for health, grateful for experiences, grateful for the blessings that God has given us that really make us who we are. And how has it changed how we live? How has it changed our experience of the world around us? And if it hasn't, the question is then why not? Shouldn't it? If we really understand the blessings of God, then shouldn't that change our relationship with God and with our world? If we can understand what the gift of wholeness and salvation is, I want to say to you that when I understood that in my life was never the same again. And I don't think any of ours would be. So the question for us today, does our life reflect the gratefulness for what God has done? This month we're going to talk about stewardship. But it's not just about money and paying bills. It's about understanding the relationship between what God has done in my life and how my life reflects that thankfulness to people who are in need, to people who are on the outside, to my church family, to the homeless, to those who are oppressed, to those who have no voice. It's about understanding that the blessings of my life compel me, change me, transform me, and empower me to bless my world. Amen.